In the book Ways of Baloma, Rethinking Magic and Kinship from the Trobriands, published in 2017, Mark Moskov provides an in-depth critique of Malinowski's perception and articulation of life in this part of Milne Bay province of Papua New Guinea. For Malinowski, spirits of the dead moved to Tuma, the invisible world of spirits, and stayed there. They returned to Boyova, the visible material world of the living people, only for the creation of a new child. Moscow, however, presents the opposite view and argues that the spirits of the dead are present in everything that Trobrianders do, and most prominently in magic. He writes, quote, "The effectiveness of Trobriand magic is a matter of kinship, that is, of ancestral spirit linkage." Moscow is, besides his own detailed ethnography and analysis, encouraged to make such a claim by Viveiros de Castro, who in the article The Gift and the Given wonders, quote, whether magic and kinship have a deeper connection than that usually acknowledged in contemporary anthropological theorizing, end of quote. He goes on to say that magic and kinship might be interrelated in terms of mysterious effectiveness of relationality. Viveiros de Castro, who also wrote foreword to Mark Moscow's book, poses the following question. Could there be a hidden affinity between, say, prescriptive marriage and magical causation? He offers a positive answer, saying that kinship is magic, for magic is kinship. In order to understand better a relation between animism and cross-cousin marriage, he proposes an additional mediatory concept, the gift, understood in terms of the form things take in an animist ontology. In ontology in which things and people take up the social form of persons, he says, gift exchange, kinship, and animism are merely different names for the same personification process. For Viveiros de Castro, in the Amazonian world of multi-naturalism, as he calls it, it is not biological bodies, that is, natural or material ones, but bodies in which specific points of view or world-defining perspectives are located. He writes, thus what I call body is not a synonym for distinctive substance or fixed shape. It is an assemblage of affects or ways of being that constitute a habitus. In other words, the body is an envelope, a changeable and removable clothing, dress or garment, hiding a common spiritual essence. This kind of body is important for Amerindians, and it is the foundation for different perspectives. Since the very beginning of my work in Ambonwari, Sepik province of Papua New Guinea, in 1990s, I have been writing about their spirits of the bush and spirits of the dead, of the importance of kinship as ancestral spirit linkage. In several of my writings, I have argued that there is no body as such, but that people perceive a variety of beings mainly through their visible skin and the ways they act, both of which can be modified. It is specific activity in terms of ways of doing things, of different beings, humans, crocodiles, pigs, birds, fish, trees, spirits, that influences their own and others' life worlds, including the whole cosmos, not the physical or biological body as such. And just like Amerindians, the notion of animality as opposed to humanity is absent among the Ambonwari. There is also no generic collective term for animal as opposed to human. Edible animals are simply called food or meat. It should also be mentioned in passing that Ambonwari do not have words for either a gift or a body, which seems an unusual case among Papuan languages. In other words, the essence of such an active being is not what a being is, but how it perceives, relates to, and influences other beings and different human domains of life. Therefore, ways of giving determine and influence kin relations, and ways of kinship determine and influence gift exchange, much more than the material gifts themselves. In other words, as Chris Gregory has argued quite some time ago, what a gift transactor desires is the personal relationships that the exchange of gifts creates, and not the things themselves. However, relationships are not visible. What is visible are skins of beings and ways of making, maintaining, and breaking up relationships. Now, how can we understand all this in the light of Merlin Strathern's and Mark Mosko's conceptualization of a partible or individual person, where Melanesians are perceived as composite or individual beings embedded in systems of Mosian reciprocal gift exchange? The items that the individual person exchange through reciprocal gifting are considered to be detachable, inalienable parts of themselves. As a result of an extended series of such interactions, individuals in relationships are recognized as extensions or parts of one another. I can strategically externalize that part of me, which will be successful in uncoupling the part of him or her that I desire. This is from the perspective of a Melanesian person and their detachable parts. However, in this paper, I will try to show that what people actually do is not giving and exchanging just things together with parts of their persons, but more importantly, they are giving and exchanging their ways of doing things, including ways of giving. I will focus first on relationships between brother and sister and husband and wife. When I give something to my sister, I'm giving her my ways of doing things, my way of living, and I'm indebting her for similar ways of doing things, her ways of living, which I expect from her in return. Therefore, I'm externalizing my ways of doing things, which my sister internalizes, and vice versa. I will also show how the ways of the spirits of the dead and other spirits are always inseparable from such an exchange, and how kin relations between the living persons are simultaneously relations between spirits. The magical flow is pervasive because of the engagements of spirits. In the second part of my paper, I will argue that the same pattern pertains to Ambonwari people's attitude towards the whites. People perceive me not through the gifts I give, but through my ways of doing things, through my way of living, of which ways of giving are, of course, at utmost importance. The intention is to generate a flow of gifts as a way of doing things in order to secure durability of expanded spaces. This is done through the ways kinship works, including the one which incorporates the whites, that is, the spirits of the dead, and expands over space and time. As Nancy Mann has shown, in her subtle account of Gawan Kula, the ultimate objective of the Kula operator is not the acquisition of wealth as such, or the power which wealth confers, but the transformation of the self into a spatial, temporally expanded form. In the next section is entitled Engagement with the Past and Future Through Kinship and Marriage. In this section, I will focus on the specific institutionalized and therefore very much structured kin relationships in their diachronic, multi-generational dimension, which are then experienced and appropriated by all those involved in a variety of intersubjective idiosyncrasies. An Ambonwari man finds himself in his patrilineal grandson. It is not that grandson would look at the past and choose his grandfather's name, kin relations, and marriage path for himself. It is rather the boy's father who secures the rebirth of the boy's grandfather through identification of his son with his father. Differentiation and identification are complementary. The father is therefore in the middle of two sons or two fathers, depending on the way one looks at them, as grandfather and grandson become the same person. With the focus on birth and temporality of a person perceived as being intertwined with temporalities of others, a temporal span of these social clusters that merge in a single person exceeds temporal span of an individual person. So it is the boy's father who looks at the past, at his own father, in order to make future by bearing a boy, who thus becomes both his son and his father, his future and his past. Although I focus at this moment only on a boy, it is same with the girls, who are identified with their patrilineal grandfather sisters. More about this later. Let me for now stay in the domain of man. If I am to achieve my future, I need a son who will bear a son, my grandson. My grandson will, by adopting and following many of my ways of doing things, including the use of same kin terms, names, and marriage paths, become me. In order to secure the way of marriage that my grandson will follow, I need a sister and her progeny, as it will become clear soon in my paper. A boy is therefore both unconcealed grandson and concealed grandfather. What is visible, way of doing things, always carries with it its invisible part and vice versa. It is important to note that the same applies to a grandfather. He too is both unconcealed grandfather and concealed grandson. Now, just as grandson and grandfather carry specific temporalities in themselves, that is a past which expands into the future, and a future that expands into the past, and share them, so does a light-skinned visitor, a white man or woman, who comes to live in Ambonwari. What is interesting is that a white man, because of his skin and ways of doing things, is first a visible spirit of a dead man, while he is simultaneously a concealed human being. Like every other being, he too embodies a specific temporality in himself, which expands into both the past and the future. I will return to this later as well. Let me now imagine that I am a young Ambonwari woman, and I am looking for my future husband, as I should according to kinship and preferred marriage. 2 generations into the past. My father's father, whom I can, beside Wasamari, grandfather, call Kopan, older brother, has a sister, whom I call Kopanma, older sister. This older sister married a man whom I call Sakuri, sister's husband. Being her Wasakunda, younger sister, I could marry this same man too, my father's sister's husband. But he's too old, as we are 2 generations apart. My 2 generations removed older sister, father's sister, and her husband have a son, whom I call Wasan, son, because he is my older sister's son. The son of this son becomes my Laman Wasan, grandson, and at the same time my real husband-to-be. Before our marriage, he properly calls me Arkai, grandmother. So in fact, instead of marrying the same man as my older sister did 2 generations earlier, I actually marry his patrilineal grandson. As we have seen before, the 2 men can be identified as the same person. Genealogy over 3 generations is therefore simultaneously identification and differentiation of kin terms, kin relationships, and ways of doing things. Now, if we look at the same situation from the perspective of brother-sister relationship, we can see that I'm still speaking as a woman, by the way, my older brother, my grandfather, that is father's father, had to have a son, that is my father, in order for me to exist in this social situation. My older brother, that is my grandfather, father's father, also had to have a sister, my older sister, who gave birth to a son, who then also had a son, my husband. Only because of a brother-sister relationship 2 generations ago, their marriage, and the 2 couples having children, I could get my own husband. Thus, a woman, as a woman, I have to thank both my father's father, that is my older brother, and my father's sister, that is my older sister, for me having a husband. This is my specific spatial temporality. It is my path. It is called Kupambang Kongong, older brother's path, big people's path, ancestral path, or Kangreng Kongong, path of before. Being a woman, I should now cook for my brother so that my grandson will in the future get a wife, my brother's son's daughter. In return, my brother should bring me raw food to cook so that my son, his sister's son, will be strong and his granddaughter, that is his son's daughter, will get a husband. My brother's patrilineal grandson will again give raw food to his sister. My patrilineal grandson, that is son, will also give raw food to her because she will be his wife. Siblinghood and filiation secure future relations of affinity. However, modified relation of affinity, first, extended through classificatory kinship, and second, in love marriage, for example, when a line of marriage is broken, modify and simultaneously secure future siblinghood and filiation. I should cook for my husband, and my husband should bring raw food in order that his patrilineal grandson will get a wife. Our patrilineal grandson, who can be identified with my husband, because I gave birth to a son who is identified with my husband's father, therefore I call both my son and my husband's father Wasan, son, will marry my younger sister, brother son's daughter. That is me again. As I am mother to both my son and my husband's father, I am actually, as we have seen earlier, both my son's grandmother and my husband's grandmother. Before our marriage, as I have already mentioned, my future husband actually called me appropriately, Arkai, grandmother. The above described marriage path is of course my future possibility, a possibility customarily desired by my parents. However, I may fall in love with some other young man and will break this path, forming a different temporality and a different future possibility for my grandchildren. However, I will still take care of my brother and he will take care of me, as I opened a new path, that is a new possibility, not only for my grandson, but also for my brother's granddaughter. In such a case, the future generations will get a choice of marriage paths. The next section is entitled When the Expected Ways of Doing Things Are Not Followed. In this part, I explore a feeding relationship between a woman and her brother and a woman and her husband. When the expected ways of doing things, that is, ways of giving food, were not followed. The women from Crocodile Clan are owners of two such ancestral stories, which complement each other and are always told together. In the first story, a woman called Pangan Sambukmai prepared sago pudding and waited for her husband, who had gone hunting and fishing with her father. The two men caught a possum and some fish, distributed the food between them, and returned to the village. However, her husband did not bring any food to her. She was angry, as did it not happen for the first time. Next morning, she went to catch grasshoppers, deliberately to the area where enemies from another village used to go. When they actually appeared and surrounded her, she did not tell them that she was a daughter of a woman from their village. That could have saved her. Instead, she was taken to the man's house in Konmei, where she was killed. The Ambonwari men from Crocodile Clan took revenge, but that did not bring her back. Then they said to their sisters, "When you move to the houses of your husbands, this ancestral story of Pangan Sambukmai will go with you. When you move into your husband's house, if his ways of doing things are bad, if he's stingy, then leave him. Bad men, leave him. Good men, stay with him." In the second story, a husband of a woman from Crocodile Clan caught a lizard and brought it home for his wife to cook. Her brother was also in the house at that time. However, she wasted time. It was already evening when her husband sent her brother away without food. Her brother went straight to the man's house, where he beat a slit drum in a rhythm that announced his sister's death. Everyone said that his sister's ways of doing things were bad, that she was a stingy woman. In the two stories, it was not fish, possum, or lizard that were important, but the ways of doing things. The woman who narrated the stories explained, "This is what the big women told us. If your brother or father comes to your house, whatever food you have, give it to them. Tell them to come and eat. Tell them, I made sago pudding. Come. I baked sago pancake. Come to eat. Women, you have to give it, that is cooked food, to your brothers. And you, brothers, have to give raw food to your wives. If husband is bad, leave him before you have any children. You must see his ways early on. You should also give food to others. They will say that crocodile women are not greedy and stingy, but generous. We do not like to be with women who eat alone. If we were like them, we would be ashamed. This is the story of our ancestors. This is our way of living, the way of living of the crocodile women. And to the last part, the whites as past and future kin and their ways of doing things. What Ambonwari people usually do with an important outsider, either Papua New Guinean or white, is that they bestow a local name on them. As each clan owns a series of names, such a person then belongs to a specific clan. The way of naming is simultaneously a way of adoption into a particular lineage of that clan with all pertaining kin relationships and ways of doing things. These latter are carefully observed by the villagers. One of the most common observations by people in the Holy Sepik province, as well as other parts of Papua New Guinea, is that a white person is their own deceased ancestor. Such a conclusion is reached, as they explain, because we eat their food, chew betel nut, share tobacco, sleep like them, and speak their language. People say that mistakes are normal, as we did not speak the local language for a long time. These ways of doing things, along with the white skin, the skin of the dead, and the wealth we bring and give away in the village, are proofs that we are spirits of their dead relatives. If you give, for example, a long male paddle to your nephew, you actually give him the way of paddling. The paddle, together with the paddler, forms a specific active being. A paddle becomes an extension of a paddler. Then that can exist only in the practice of paddling, as a way of moving on the river. A similar perspective applies to the things bought in the town or brought in the village by the white people. Throughout the last 30 years that I have been on and off living with the Ambonwari people, they tried many new practices that would bring desired ways of doing things into their lives. In 1990s, illiterate men walked around with a notebook and a pen. A hand watch was a desirable gift, even if it did not work or people did not really use it. People in different parts of Papua New Guinea, including Ambonwari, wrote letters to their deceased relatives and asked their white man or woman to deliver them upon their return to Australia, Europe, or USA. Nowadays, in the area with the mobile phone network, with no mobile phone network, Ambonwari use mobile phones to try to ring their deceased relatives. Christianity too brought a variety of spirits, from the Holy Spirit, different good spirits and angels, to spirit namesakes and bad spirits associated with the devil. They too, through exchange of ways of doing things, became their kin, participating in their lives. In gift economy, the way of doing things, that is, way of living, goes together with a thing or a form. In kinship politics, the way of doing things comes with kinship terms and associated names, personal names, place names, names of the spirits. Thus, a notebook with a pen, a watch, or a mobile phone, for example, are expected to come with the ways of doing things that not only pertain to these things, but to the world from which they came from. This is expected from the whites who are associated with these things and identified with Australia, Europe, and USA, and all those living there, including their own spirits of the dead. Under the influence of Christianity, all these places merged in one place called heaven. This is the magical part of anticipated future, as a person cannot do just by himself or himself, but with the magical skills of their deceased kin, a white man or a woman, it is now a moral responsibility of a kin person how all this will be realized in the future. Conclusion. Although I have focused on a woman and her relationship with her brother and husband, the gift giving as a way of doing things pertains also to other kin relationships, including those with the whites. With each thing given, the way of doing things is given too, which is to say that what is given is a specific way of living. Just as the spirits of ancestors and their doings are part of the living people and their doings, so are the living people as ancestors to be, present in the lives of their yet unborn children and their activities. In other words, just as the past is part of the present, so is the present part of the future, However, just as the living people and their actions are part of the spirits of ancestors, and their doings, the past reveals itself always anew, so are yet unborn grandchildren and their activities part of both the living people and the spirits of ancestors. In other words, as we have seen through kin relationships and ways of doing things through generations, just as the present is part of the past, so is the future part of the present and the past. Therefore, when the white people appear, they are first the spirits of their death, that is, their deceased kin coming from the future. Their ways of doing things, which are expected to be given and shared for life and beyond, will show if the anticipated future will become unconcealed and tangible or remain hidden as it has largely been the case until now.